Welcome to another episode of Tech Unhinged, where tech gets human. I'm your host, Rabia Javed, and today I'm excited to have Anavi on the show. Anavi is a leader in cloud infrastructure and product management at Microsoft with nearly a decade of experience shaping AI solutions with Azure Databricks. She's been at the forefront of some incredible large-scale tech initiatives, helping businesses scale their AI infrastructure. She's also passionate about advocating inclusivity in tech, paving her way for future generations of leaders, especially women in tech. Welcome to the show, Anavi.
Thanks so much, Rabia. I'm so glad to be here. This seems like such a great platform and happy to share what little insight I may have.
We're really glad to have you joining us today. And now we will start off with your journey, which is super impressive for us, especially, with your leadership role at Microsoft. Can you start by telling us how you got into tech and what sparked your interest in cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. I actually didn't want to work at Microsoft when I was in school. That was not something that I thought I would do. At the time, I was just applying to a bunch of different jobs, just like one does, when they're graduating. And my father happened to mention that, hey, why don't you apply to Microsoft? And I was like, Micro what? I'm like, this is not a relevant company. Like, they're not doing anything cool. Like, why would I want to work there? Right. And I studied math and statistics. So I was like, hey, I'm going to be a lead analyst and I'm going to be the person who does exactly what she studied, right? Because mostly I was talking to people who are doing something completely different than what they were studying, which I don't know why I cared about that, but I was like, yes, I'm going to be that person. I studied math and statistics. I'm going to do analysis and I'm going to do that. But then, my father is as stubborn as me. And so he didn't let it go. And so I was like, you know what? It's just one more job. I'll apply to it. So I happened to apply to it. And I got a call from someone who then went on to become my manager as things would have it. And he asked me on the phone, he's like, hey, do you know what Azure is? I'm many things, but I'm not a liar. And I was like, no, I actually don't know what Azure is. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do. And he was actually I could see a little surprise or shock or feel a little surprise or shock in his voice. And I said, okay, I'm not going to get this call back. Like, it is what it is. Lo and behold, he did call me back and say, hey, like, we want to get you in person for a interview round. And at the time, we didn't have the luxury of virtual. This was like pre-lockdowns and such. And so I went onto the Microsoft headquartered campus here in Redmond, and each interviewer I talked to, it was just a conversation because there was no pressure. I felt like I don't want this job. I already know what the job I want is, or so I thought. So there's no pressure. And it was just conversations that we had. And I learned about what they were doing in Azure. And it was the coolest thing. I was like, wait, why aren't you talking about this more? This is awesome. And so halfway through the day, I was like, wait, now I want this job. And now I'm concerned because I feel like I could have prepared more for it. But yeah, as things panned out, they were super interested. And I think they took a shot on me, even though I didn't have any background in networking or the cloud. And then I started working there. So I think I landed up. I don't know if you believe in destiny or not, but I think it just kind of worked out. And thanks to my dad, I guess he was like, you must apply. And I was like, fine, I guess I will. So that's actually how I ended up at Microsoft, and then specifically on the Azure team, specifically on the Azure networking team. And so I had to learn all about networks and TCP/IP and packet flows and connectivity. And the thing about network, we always say, is like network is like the air. People only worry about it when it's not around, right? Or when you don't have it. When things are great, nobody really thinks about it. But like even in this, podcast, if there's no network, we wouldn't be able to be connected as a whole, right? And so it's just something we all need, but we don't realize. And so it was cool to learn more about that as I delved deeper into the cloud infrastructure. Super random foray into cloud, but I'm glad I made it.
Yeah, and we're sort of glad to have you here today with us because of all of that. So, Anami, what does a typical day look like for you at Microsoft?
So great question. The funniest thing is in the last 9 years, I don't think any 2 days have been the same. And I think that's an environment where some people would not like, but I feel like I thrive in that. Maybe one day you're writing docs, maybe on one day you're driving a bridge because a customer is down, or maybe on one day there's a customer escalation, you're talking to a customer. I feel like I walk in every day, I'm like, these are the 3 things I need to get done. And then it's very unlikely that all those 3 things get done, but other things do get done overall. So a typical day is usually, of course, supporting my team as best as I can. I'm very people-centric. People matter to me significantly, so they're always my top priority. But apart from that, it's just really you do what you need. And I think that's really the skill that you develop as a product manager. You do what it takes to get things done, right? So whether I'm a content writer one day, whether I'm a marketing person, whether I'm an escalation manager, whether I'm looking at a support ticket to help help a customer or whether I'm driving a incident bridge, as we call it, I feel like every day I discover like, okay, what am I going to learn today? And that's part of the excitement that I really thrive in my opinion. I don't think I could do a job that is very similar day in and day out. And that's part of the thrill for me overall. So in one day, these are kind of the different things that happen, but it's really hard to predict just because of the nature of the cloud, right? If a customer needs something or there's an outage or there's a customer issue, you're going to step in and prevent everything else. Of course, this is beyond like the day-to-day of building features, writing specs, working on execution, updating stakeholders and leadership on different things going on. Apart from that, there's always some fires going on, but I think it keeps it interesting. As much as I complain about them sometimes, I think I do thrive in that environment. So that's a glimpse into day-to-day, at least for my role here at Microsoft.
No, I think that's great. As long as we're getting the kick and, keep up with the right motivation and spirit, it only makes us better at our jobs, I believe.
I agree. I think it truly pushes you to your boundaries. Definitely reflecting on the last decade, what I used to do maybe day one, year one, it's so different than how I handle it today. And sometimes it's nice to just pause and acknowledge that growth, right? I think the bar is constantly moving in our minds, so sometimes we forget. And so at Microsoft, we do kind of annual reviews like twice a year. We call them connects. And so I always find that season a good time to be like, okay, wow, like, yeah, I did accomplish something. We did accomplish something, and taking time to reflect on that in that journey, I think it's truly incredible because sometimes things are moving so fast in the cloud that you forget to acknowledge like, okay, yeah, we guys, like we're doing stuff. Yes, there's customer escalations, but I don't think if customers are happy, they're going to escalate to the product group and be like, hey, I'm so happy. I just wanted to escalate to you and let you know, right? So we'll always see the not so great maybe feedback, but that doesn't mean there's not great feedback too.
So how has your role evolved over time, with the growing focus on AI in particular? Has it been more challenging lately, or do you think that, things are comparatively easier now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my role has evolved from building the infrastructure that AI needs because there's a lot of capacity that's needed to power this kind of stuff, right? And I think we do need to get better and more efficient, and we're working on the software side to try to make that more efficient. We are, I would say, in my opinion, very early days of AI, right? Just like we were in the mobile first world, just like we were in like the internet overall. I think we're still in early days and we're trying to all figure out how we can add value to people's lives, improve productivity, or add value to the world as a whole. So that being said, though, I think it's interesting to see the other side of it, right? My friends will be like, oh, I asked AI like what itinerary I should do for my trip to XYZ. And I'm over here like, dude, do you know how much capacity I'm trying to support to make that happen? And you're asking these silly questions. So I saw kind of the other side of it. So it was funny because that's how I actually built relationships with a lot of the few folks in the larger open source and AI community, because we had to power them with all of this capacity to build their products and their chat interfaces that most people use today. And so initially, I feel like I had a not so great opinion or view of it, because massive amount of capacity and then scaling that across regions and then making sure when you're connecting across regions, there's no latency so that you get that response for your freaking itinerary of wherever you're going super quickly. And so seeing the other side of how things are made to power that, I think was a very refreshing method. And then since then, I've switched into more of the data analytics and AI space with Azure Databricks. And so now my previous products are the infrastructure, right? So I used to own these networking products as a whole. And so it's really like I know what is under the covers and what is behind. And now I'm, on top of that infrastructure, so to speak. And so now I'm also asking the questions or helping people ask the questions. And so it's been an interesting development knowing both the under the covers and the infrastructure, but then also now how people are leveraging it for their use cases and how they can remove mundane tasks from people's lives and help productivity and just help make time for things you actually want to do versus things you can outsource and automate like mundane tasks. So that's been kind of my journey overall. I think I'm still a little bit of a skeptic just because I feel like it's early days and we haven't figured out how we're actually going to add value coupled with the cost, whether that's environmental cost or whether that's cost of other angles as well. But I think we'll get there. Just like anything, it's still nascent, it's still new. And we'll figure out what the right way to do going forward. But it's lovely to be part of it, right? Instead of waiting and finding out where it's going to go. It's nice to be able to influence the industry and be part of that change, so to speak. So it's been really rewarding, really hard, really tough, but I'm glad to have those different angles, both on the infrastructure side and now more on the analytics, data, and AI side.
Yeah, because I think that, in today's time, the impact is a lot faster in comparison to how things were before. You do something and then the impact is out there, and the tech industry is actually moving at a really, really fast pace, I believe. So, that's really thrilling.
Absolutely. And I think there's like, I really have maybe a too black and white view of the world, but I really believe there's the people who are going to complain, the people who are going to do stuff, right? Like I could sit there and complain like, oh, this is not good and this is not good. Or I could say, yeah, you know what, that is not good, but here's how we're going to make it better, or here's how we're going to improve it, or here's what we can do. And so I think this is the time to do that. And we need those different voices from different backgrounds and different skill sets overall to lean in so that in the future we don't suffer the consequences of it, right? And so I think we all have that responsibility and that accountability to lean in and make sure that we do create something that's adding value to the world overall.
When we talk about building AI infrastructure versus buying it, what exactly do those terms mean for businesses that are just starting to explore AI?
Yeah, I think I would think of it as like, I always try to take these seemingly complex things and simplify it in everyday language. Just think of it as like buying a pre-built Lego functionality. Maybe, I don't know, you want to buy the Taj Mahal in Lego, right? Let's say it's already bought, let's say, and it's already assembled by someone versus you taking the time with the pieces and assembling it. I think it really depends on your use case, right? Because the latter, which is you assembling it, aka building your own custom use case for your custom AI, you get to control the nuts and bolts and the knobs overall. Yes, that comes at a SME knowledge. You have to read the instructions of the Lego. You have to know what's happening. You have to know what it looks like. You have to maintain it. If the pieces come across, it's on you. Versus just buying it, you can say, hey, no, like I have this warranty. Like it came across. Like, can you fix it? This is kind of your issue as a whole. So that's at a high level, what I would say is, buying it off the shelf, so to speak, and then versus custom, aka building it, just in layperson terms that we can all understand. But there is added nuance to it, right? That comes at a cost. The customization is super helpful when your scenario is a unique one that you need for your own company, whether that's specific access control, etc. However, in this day and age, we have companies like Azure Databricks, right? The team that I'm on, the service that we provide, where it's someone's full-time job to find what the best model is for you to execute on, whatever scenario for business users that you're trying to do. And it's someone's job to say, okay, how can I make this more performant? How can I make this cost effective overall, right? So those are the trade-offs that one would usually think about it, that initial investment versus maintenance costs, and then things like patching and maintenance as a whole. So it's really if you want to hire someone to do a job that's an expert versus you build that in-house expertise. And because the game is changing so frequently, it may be hard to build that expertise in-house. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of companies just say, hey, no, actually, I want to use, Microsoft AI services or Azure Databricks and the like to do that for me as I build it out. So I don't have to have a custom in-house team with all of those expertise that I have to then build and manage and maintain overall. So that's a high level of kind of some of the trade-offs. Of course, there's other angles like risk, security, technical debt, and also the time that it takes for you to build a team, get it at production scale, and then ship it to production versus maybe what people who are doing this already as a service would be very, very different. So those are a few things to consider in those two options.
Yeah. So, if you sort of have to state down a few factors, given your experience, when is it sort of a no-brainer for a company to build its own infrastructure? And, when is it better to go with a pre-built solution?
Great question. I think if your scenario is such that, hey, you want to, let's take the data example, right? Because that's the space that I work in a lot more now. And so in that scenario, if you want to get rich insights from your data that you already have, and you don't want to worry about access control and authentication, etc. In those kinds of scenarios, I would always recommend something like Azure Databricks as a whole, right? It's a no-brainer to me because personally, one of our main missions is we want people to spend less time working with the data and cleaning the data and getting the data to the form that you need to then build AI on top of it. Let us take care of that for you so you and your team spend time actually getting the insights and the rich insights that you can from the data. And so really kind of outsourcing or letting us take care of all of that compliance, patching, maintenance. So that's usually what I would recommend. One would say I'm biased overall. That being said, though, some teams or some companies are also starting to build their in-house expertise of these kinds of solutions. And so they also lean towards a hybrid model as well, where for some major well-tested scenarios, they'll use something like Azure Databricks or AI Foundry, etc. at Microsoft. But then for specific use cases, they'll do that. So a hybrid approach is also, I think, less work, but I definitely recommend just using a service for it. I think that it's a lot easier. You get to co-innovate, with us at Microsoft. We learn more about your use cases and scenarios, and then we take care of kind of the hassle overall. So in my experience, that's totally what I would recommend.
So, the points that you mentioned, do they sort of apply both to smaller companies and large organizations, or does the size matter?
Yeah, great question. I think the size totally matters, right? If you are a small company, how are you going to find a team to go and build all of these things for you? So in those cases, I would recommend using a service and then investing instead in the service versus the in-house expertise. So you're able to fail fast and move fast as a whole and see if the scenario is actually applicable for your use case for your company. Larger enterprises, I feel like it's a no-brainer, right? They're already doing this with their cloud infrastructure and Azure. It's a similar move that we saw from on-premises to the cloud, right? Where people had their own data centers that they were running, they were managing, etc. Then the era of the cloud came, and we're still actually seeing some migrations now from on-premises into the cloud. Very similar, right? If you have your own data center, you have to take on everything and you manage everything. Yes, it comes with more control, but it comes with more cost as well, right? So it's that cost trade-off. And smaller companies, I've seen that they are more conscious of the cost, rightly so, right? Like I am too, like nothing against that. But then it might be better in that scenario to outsource it, so to speak, or buy the service and the product as a whole, because the people cost maintaining that in the long term does add up. And for enterprises, I think it's a no-brainer, right? You just use something like Azure Databricks as a whole, which is what we're seeing. It's one of our largest markets today.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. So, Anavi, for businesses opting to buy solutions like Databricks, what are some of the hidden costs or challenges they should clearly keep in mind?
I think the biggest thing is understanding your data estate, right? So a lot of these solutions, AI is kind of at the top of all of the base that's the data. And the problem with data today is in multiple formats, they're structured, unstructured data, etc. So usually when we work with customers, we want to make sure that there's some understanding of where they want to get to. So my question that I always ask is, okay, what if you could make up all of your data estate today, like just dream it up and you had unlimited resources, what would that look like, right? And so it's always about simplicity, consistency, and ease of use. And so getting there though requires some management and some hand-holding overall. So one thing that I always recommend is making sure that you understand where you're at, right? So doing an audit and saying, hey, this is where we are and this is where we want to be. And then once we get there, using, plugging that data, whether your data is in another cloud, whether your data is in unstructured data, structured data, in external third-party sources as a whole. But knowing what that is, I think, is like the biggest deal. The second thing that I would say is also, what is the questions that your company is struggling with overall, right? Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is enable even people who are not data science experts or data intelligence experts, or who don't need to understand everything about the data, should be able to ask the question, right? My goal or my personal belief is that imagine just being able to talk to your data. So you don't have to go ask someone, hey, what are last quarter's results? Or are we meeting our revenue targets, etc. Right? We do business reviews in variety of organizations for this. What if on the fly, I could just talk to my data to know in real time, so there's no lag about that? Think about the minutes and the time spent that we could save over the course of so many periods of time. So I think two things to summarize: understanding where you're at today and where you want to go. And then two, with that, what are insights or what are questions you want to ask your data, and how do you make it as accessible as possible? like the best use case for me is you have your data, Azure Databricks, you're doing all of your analysis insights, you use an AI model, whatever AI model that you prefer, and you build an agent, you can talk to it in Microsoft Teams, right? People all over the world for different companies use Teams. Imagine just being able to ask that question directly. I don't even have to know what model it is. I don't even have to know what data product you're using under the covers. I get my question answered. And that's so powerful because now I don't have to go to school for data science or take a course of like how to learn Azure Databricks or anything of the sort. I just have that information to my advantage. And that's powerful, right? Like empowering anyone to get those insights within your organization. So that's usually a mindset that I like to prime our customers with and envision a future like that, because I think that is the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot of tech jargon that we just talked about right now,
Sometimes I do
But
feel like I drink too much of the Kool-Aid. I'm like, wait, am I even making sense to people not in tech? Like, I don't know.
no, I think, the value that you add by making things more relatable for the layman, and for the people who are not typically from tech background, that sort of matters a lot because at the end of the day, you should be able to understand all of this, and there's no other point. Yeah.
And I think I noticed that, to your point, though, I noticed that early in my career. I think a lot of people had networking PhDs and all of these things, right? And they were like, oh, like networking is complex. And don't get me wrong, it is complex. But I think the true skill that people have, I think the true sign of intelligence, I think the true sign of understanding is if you can take something that's seemingly complex and simplify it, right? And that's really what I've tried to do overall. I'm like, a virtual network, guys, it's just kind of like your home in the cloud. Everybody understands what a home is, right? But now it's a home in the cloud. So simplifying things that are seemingly complex is going to be so critical. And I know there's always this narrative of like, oh, AI is coming for your job, etc. Nobody can take something complex and simplify it without like a human involved, right? You have to understand who you're talking to, how you're talking to it. So in my opinion, it's going to help you be more productive, but I don't think it's coming after your jobs, right? I think your jobs will change and evolve, and you see how you can add more value with this on the side. But so important to take these complex things and make it accessible, right? Like everybody should have access to information, and everybody should be able to make the right decisions based on the information they have available to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very beautifully put together by you. So, Anavi, if we sort of dive a bit into the governance and security side of things, data governance and compliance have become top priorities in AI infrastructure. So, how do large organizations like Microsoft handle the complexity of these regulations while scaling AI solutions?
Yeah, great question. So at Microsoft, we have an annual, I believe, like $1 billion that we put towards just cybersecurity and safety overall, right? And coupled with, I think, a team of almost 9,000 people, if I remember correctly. But that's just an example to show the scale of which we're doing this for, right? Because we're constantly protecting our customers across the board for all Microsoft services. Then specifically when it comes to AI, so you'll see the example with Azure OpenAI, right? The difference between maybe other models is that, hey, we have responsible AI that comes with certain policies that we add on, and which is why then Microsoft trusted services are actually trusted by consumers as a whole. So I think the key to this is just having a group of people and building that in-house expertise. And we've been doing this for a while, right? Compliance regulations are not new for a variety of different things, but now there's that added angle of AI overall, right? And I think that is actually the biggest factor that we see for customers to take POCs or proof of concepts of AI out to scale and use it in their companies, right? Making sure it's safe, making sure it's reliable, making sure you have that governance angle as a whole. So one thing I really appreciate with Azure Databricks and then Databricks as a whole is the governance that is offered with the Unity catalog. So the names of the features and the functionalities really don't matter, but being able to give someone fine-grained security control, whether it's like, hey, actually, like you're not in HR, so you can't see, I don't know, salary information, etc. So having that fine-grained level of control is going to be important in exposing that, but then also having the backing of a large company like Microsoft, whose job it is, people's job it is to make sure that this is secure, compliant, and updating, right? Policies are constantly being updated as a whole. So that's something that I feel like we offer, which is very different from maybe a Databricks solution on another cloud as a whole. And at Microsoft, we have what we call a first-party integration. And all that means is that the Azure solution is a Microsoft-backed product versus what you get in maybe other clouds as a whole. whole. So yeah, to summarize, I think having that built-in expertise of people who are doing this, we've been doing this for years as a whole, coupled with making that available and accessible to customers in services, because security, governance, and compliance, this is really the three key pieces. Without this, any product fails, not just AI as a whole, right? But any product without it is really the fundamentals. You might have seen something that Microsoft is doing, which is the Secure Futures Initiative, or SFI as we call it internally, making sure that these fundamental things are just covered across the board, right? And we have to report to a vast many authorities on the status of that overall. But those are the kind of things that are super critical. And I think that no one can do it at the scale and the reliability like Microsoft can overall. But yeah, they're the cornerstones. Without this, there's no product.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Anavi, in your experience, what strategies you think businesses should use to prioritize long-term scalability without sacrificing immediate business needs when we talk about, leveraging AI?
Good question. I think the key is having that vision of where you want to be in the long term, how that's going to happen in the short term as well, right? So, because what I mean by that, and if I say it a little differently, is sometimes you'll have to take a cost in the short term to make things better in the long term, right? And that I think is where that question that I usually ask customers is, where do you see this going? What is your dream scenario for data and AI, and how do you want to enable it? And having that vision or that long-term goal, I think much like in life, right, really helps. Like in the short term, you have to do some things that are maybe painful. And so when I say painful in this context, it may be like taking the cost on, right? Having the right stakeholders agree that this is how we define policies, this is how we interact with the data, and this is what we're going to do. And maybe there's friction because your company is not used to having these policies or these guidelines or this procedure as a whole. So in the short term, it may be painful because policies, guidelines need to be updated. But in the long term, because everybody's resistant to change, right? Like we all are. It's like, oh, why do we have to change? But once you show that, hey, here's how we can make this better for everyone in our company, because the next time you need to leverage AI for your business use case, this is like our method of operation or our modus operandi, so to speak, right? And I think that really is how to make that short-term cost, whether that is actually monetary cost, whether that's cost of training people, changing mindsets, whether that's cost of even retiring services and products, right? Or whether there's technical debt, that's another aspect of it. So those are costs that I would take personally for that long term. Now, that's in my experience. Of course, every company has to decide for themselves, but those are key factors that we've seen. Also in the short term, your upfront cost may be more, but in the long term, your maintenance cost will be less, right? So that's another consideration that I would recommend for people.
So, while Databricks and other third-party platforms offer powerful tools, how can businesses sort of ensure that they're not too reliant on a single vendor?
I'm of the school of thought that unfortunately you are going to be reliable on a vendor. You just want to make sure you pick the vendor that's best for your use case. In this day and age, with the cloud, with the size of data, with the scale, it is impossible for every company to go build that kind of scale and infrastructure out. So I think step one is just resetting expectations. You are going to be reliant, like period, right? Like it is what it is, the nature of the business. And yes, maybe it sucks, but at the end of the day, you do get the benefits of it. That's kind of one reset I would do. But that being said, you are welcome to build tools that are portable, right? Like we were just talking to a customer yesterday and they were like, hey, I need to do some stuff on our side to make sure that the tools and the code that I have is portable. So in the event that I do need to shift it, I'm able to, right? So that's kind of the perspective that I would recommend, where like, whether you like it or not, you will be reliant on a vendor, and whether that's a cloud vendor, whether that's a data and analytics and AI solution vendor as a whole, is going to be part of the business. But it is your responsibility, and that's maybe the cost or the maintenance or the expertise or the technical debt that you take on, or the technical cost, not the debt, that you take on to say, hey, but in the event that things don't go well, I'm able to still have a migration strategy or a migration plan as a whole, and making sure you're using tools and functionality that is portable, and have that plan mapped out, right? So I always say, like, I don't have a backup plan. I have a plan B, I have a plan C, I even have a plan Z, right? It's from all the way from A to Z. And so that's my just funny way of saying that, hey, you always plan for the worst case scenario. You always assume breach in security. You always assume failure in availability, but you plan for it, right? You don't sit in this world that, oh, nothing's going to fail and everything's going to be secure. No, you assume breach and then plan for it because you want to limit the breach. You want to make sure you contain it within a small blast radius and go from there. So just like that, that same principle is like, okay, you are reliant on a provider. In the event that something happens, what is your game plan and how do you mitigate your risk in that scenario? That's where that I usually recommend people follow, because we shouldn't be kidding ourselves, right? There's only a few major players here. You are going to be reliant on them. We've seen that very recently with some of the outages and issues that have happened in the world. So that's my personal philosophy on it. I don't think it's the most popular one, but that's my take.
No, I think that you said it great. And also, while you were mentioning about change, I think change is indeed the only constant, and we've sort of got to just keep up with it. If we can't, then we're just out of the game.
Pretty much. Like, I think that right now there's no choice, right? You got to be adaptable continually. Totally.
So, Anavi, as a woman in a leadership role at Microsoft, what unique challenges have you faced in this male-dominated industry?
It's funny. So I didn't think this used to be a thing, to be honest. I think growing up, for some reason, I don't know if I was privileged or not, but you used to hear about this. I used to hear about stories of people saying like, oh, there's not enough women. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm surrounded by women. Women are everywhere. Women are awesome. We love women. It was not until, so I studied math and statistics, as I mentioned earlier. It was not until my senior year, which is my last year, I was in this upper level math course. And I was one of two women in that course. It was just me and my friend. And of course we became closer and it was just us. And that's when it really hit me. And that was my first, like, I didn't realize that this was a thing because I had never experienced myself. Of course, I believe people and I believe their lived experiences, but I think it's different slightly when you experience it yourself. So I think that was my first harsh kind of hit in the head moment where I was like, oh, wait, like, yeah, it is just two of us in this like 40, 30 person class, which is crazy to me. So that was kind of my first, okay, like this is a thing. And I think even today there are a lot of rooms where I'm the only woman in, but I don't think that, luckily for me, that has been an issue. And I think mostly that's because of the people that I have around me. And that's just luck, right? I didn't pick that, hey, this is going to be my team. It just happened that this was my team. And that's actually another reason why I've stuck around for the time that I have, because we just have straight up good people who will have your back and who will defend you in situations like that. So I have heard of experiences of women that are not as great. And so I will not deny that it is hard and sometimes it is less than ideal and people have had to change teams or even careers in some cases. But in my personal experience, I'm very thankful that I have not had to deal with that, mostly because of that allyship and the people that I have around me, because I think it's more powerful when you come to someone else's defense, right? Because yes, something is happening to you, but seeing someone else step in and say, hey, actually, no, that's not right. I think that's more powerful. And that's the culture that I've tried to build in my team from my experience early on. So I think I totally lucked out, but it's kind of sad that I lucked out, right? Like, this should be the norm. This should be the experience overall. So while I did luck out, I try to then go and be that same ally for other people overall when I hear stories or when I hear their lived experiences of what I can do. So the other aspect is, whether you like it or not, currently we are in what I would say a game that's rigged, right? Like, we should just be upfront about it. I think that women are judged more harshly. I think women do have disadvantages in different areas. But my perspective on that is, hey, at least I know the game is rigged. And as a result of that, I can make my moves appropriately. And so that's what I try to do overall. I think denying it or thinking that it's not the case is not going to help anyone. But then being in a position of power, I'm also able to influence that and change that and call things out, right? Like, I've definitely called people out, or maybe I would say call people in is a better way of saying. I've called people in overall, and mostly people are like, wow, I didn't even realize that that's how I came across to her, and I'll totally follow up, right? People mean well. I think people want to do the right thing. We're busy, we're not at the same empathy level maybe, but in my experience, every time I've come to someone's aid and saying, hey, actually, that didn't sit well with me, I'll give you the best of intent, right? Maybe your intent was the best, but here's what I think. And every single time, I think that's happened like 5 times or 6 times. Every single time the person on the other side is like, wow, like, thank you for letting me know. I didn't even think of it that way. Let me go figure it out and fix it. So I think we have that responsibility. And I think I have that responsibility personally, being that ally overall. So that's a little bit of my kind of experience with it. I don't think I have necessarily oh my God, like this happened and it was hard for me personally. Like I said, I've lucked out, but it's sad that I've lucked out. But then I give back and I make sure that when I see something that's not okay, I call people in.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, calling people in. And then I do believe that people in higher positions, or maybe people who are at, more bigger hierarchical positions than you are in, at times they have a way of saying things and not understanding how things are coming across. And at times it's not just easy to tell them or call them in, that, whoop,
It is hard. It's a skill I had to learn. So one of my really great mentors and friends, who I'm lucky to call a friend, that I met through work as well, he taught me this. One day I was complaining. I was like, I just think that this person like didn't say this well or whatever. And he was like, hey, like, this happens to everyone. Here's my strategy about it. And if it didn't sit well with you, just say that, hey, it didn't sit well with you. And take it one-on-one, right? Take it with them one-on-one. There's no need to do this in like a group setting. So a quick email, or better yet, a call, because sometimes tones and written text can be misconstrued. And so this is what I learned from him. And he said, hey, just take them aside and say, hey, this is what happened. It didn't sit well with me. I'm going to assume the best intent because, I've worked with you before, but I just thought that I should let you know, etc. And it seems like such a silly thing when he told it out to me loudly. I was like, wait, why didn't I think of that? But ever since then, I've just been doing that. And it's little things. And every single time, I kid you not, everybody's been like, wow, actually, thank you. Like, I never even saw it from that point of view. Like, this is actually super helpful. I'm like, okay, amazing. You're not an actual, so I'm not going to sit there and kind of resent this person for the rest of my life. And in most cases, our working relationships have improved as a whole because you're building the trust, you're building the credibility. But I think it's your responsibility to do it politely, professionally, and kindly. And always assume good intent, right? Like, that's, I think, the key. I don't think people are like inherently evil out there and being like, oh, like, I'm going to make this person's life hell, right? It takes spine to do that. I had to learn that. I didn't know that you could just do that. And of course, I was way younger at the time. So I got also called in. I was like, hey, like, if something doesn't sit well with you, maybe just say it politely to the person. They probably meant well. And that saved my life so many times for sure. But it is hard. It's not easy to do. It takes a spine.
Yeah, it absolutely is because, I often see women, even in my space, they would rather let it go than to address it. And at times, no matter how, powerful they are in their particular positions, they would just rather stay quiet or choose to not talk about it. And then, since you're brought up differently, I mean, it is indeed a privilege again with, the spaces that you were in, or probably I was in. But then, there are women that I would feel that they would just let something slip away or just, let it go, knowing very well that they should be voicing it out rather than hiding it.
Yeah, and I think this is one of actually a great example of a short-term pain for a long-term benefit. It is very uncomfortable to have these conversations sometimes. Yes, you can do it politely, professionally, but it does make you uncomfortable, right? Like the first time I was like, wait, like I'm telling this person that like something that they did for like regarding how they talked to someone else did not sit well with me. Like, first of all, like what gives me the right or whatever. But I think that is uncomfortable and that's not easy, but I think that's important because it's a short-term pain for a long-term benefit, right? Because think about the other experiences of different people, of any people, how you're making better to influence that, right? And at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to, for me at least, I'm sleeping with myself at night. I want to be able to do, like, I have done everything in my capability to make sure people around me are treated well. If I know of something that's not happening well, like I've done everything in my power to change that, right? That's what it comes down to. I personally do not want to be the person where I see something and I didn't say anything about it. And I just don't think I could live with myself personally, right? So I think that that's really all it comes down to. And that's a short-term uncomfortable conversation or a short-term. Now it's easy. Now I feel like I have like a way. So now I'm like happy to do it. But initially it was like a short-term uncomfortable conversation for like a long-term benefit.
Now you're just a pro.
Now I'm happy to do it. Easy.
Yeah, I
But again,
agree.
you have to put time in.
Yeah. So, Anavi, what role do you think women and diverse perspectives play in driving innovation in the tech landscape, given that, at times it's said that women are more high on emotions or they tend to be more empaths in comparison to men? We do not really have to believe in these, but then I believe that they do have a certain, impact on these larger ideas. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll say two things. The first thing I'll say is that human beings, irrespective of gender, are decision makers based on emotion. There's research and study based on this. There was a study that was done where the part of our brain controls emotion. Actually, that part of these people's, the sample side was damaged. Okay, so they couldn't actually feel emotions the way that the rest of us do. And these people were asked to make decisions, logic out, like, which option is better, for example. I mean, probably not these basic questions, but I'm just giving an example. All of those people could logic the questions. Not a single one could make a decision. What that means is that human beings, whether we want to believe it or not, our decisions are emotionally based, period. So I think this is something we all have to align on, irrespective of gender. It is just the way we are. We can logic through things, but without the emotion side of our brain, we will not make decisions because it is based on that. So I think that's something that I always want to ground people in. I was like, irrespective of gender, like it's going to be based on that. The second thing in my experience, I have seen more women have more, I would say, social aptitude, right? Dynamics and understanding things overall. Although I do see men nowadays also understanding that. But I think I would use that to my advantage, right? I think that's something that I always encourage people that I mentor to use that to your advantage, right? If you have more empathy, if you are more socially apt, if you have that kind of understanding of dynamics, body language, etc., use that to your benefit. Because at the end of the day, what is going to make you successful is who you can impact, who you can influence, how you get people to commonly agree on a mission and drive that forward, right? Especially in my role as a product manager, it's so important to get people together to a common mission or a goal with constraints and driving that forward. And if I have a skill set such as better social empathy or more social aptitude than someone else, I'm going to use that to my advantage as a whole, right? Like I'm a strong believer of using the resources you have at your disposal or leverage to get things done, right? So that's one example that I would recommend people do day to day. I do not believe the narrative that women are more emotional. In my experience, it's been the other gender that's more emotional. And I'm like, okay, guys, like get over it. Like, let's all move on. It's not personal overall. But and I think I've said that. I think one of my biggest flexes in like an email was it was all men and they were getting emotional and I was the only woman on this alias or on this email thread. And I literally said, all right, guys, let's not get too emotional over here. Let's remember we're trying to focus on the company and the customer. And that's our common mission. And let's do that, right? And one of the senior leaders responded to me and said, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I was like, yeah, let's not kid ourselves. Let's not say it's one gender over the other. We're all like this. We're all human beings. It is what it is. But I will say that, yeah, if I have that social aptitude and irrespective of my gender, I'm going to use it to my advantage.
No, I think I love your honesty there and how, you have a certain sass about your personality. So, it makes me ask you this question that, have you felt this difference in your leadership style in comparison to your other male colleagues and how they are leading their teams? Or do you feel that, given what you just said recently, there's not really much difference?
Yeah, I think being a leader is so personal. It's so much to do with how you can push yourself. Like when I had the opportunity to become a manager, honestly, I was like, wait, like, are you sure? Like, what? Like, this is going to be a lot of work, right? Because now you're kind of in this role where you have a working style and you have a way to do things, but you have to meet other people from different backgrounds, different qualifications, different skill sets, different personalities as a whole, and help them be like, oh, how can we work together to get something done? And that's really like, I have to kind of update the way I function based on the person as a whole, right? So maybe one, like, for example, person A is, hey, if you give them something, they will do it and they'll run with it and they'll come back to an update. If I try to micromanage or ask specific questions to this type of person, it's going to rub them the wrong way and they're going to be ineffective. Versus there's person B who is actually not good with time management, and sometimes they work better when they have a deadline. So then I have to be the person who be like, hey, this is our deadline for this. And then that makes them better, right? So it's really hard in the sense that you have to meet people where they are, but you have to update your leadership style in order to do that. And I think that takes a lot of work and time and energy. And not a lot of people realize that. And all the good managers that I have, which luckily in my experience has only been good managers, have taken the time to understand the individual, understand the way the person works, and then updating their styles based on that. So I think that's one in terms of day to day. Again, that's I think irrespective as a whole. But then I think something that I've realized that sets me apart maybe versus other people or my colleagues is that, hey, you can be smarter than me, you can be more technical than me, you can be whatever better than me as a whole. But I think something that you cannot do is care more than me. And when you care, the way you do something is very different than when you don't care as a whole, right? And I think it's so important for everyone to find their differentiator, what it is. And I didn't realize that until I switched teams, and then a lot of people came in, or my previous team came up to me and said, hey, like, you've set such a high bar as a manager, and I don't think I'll ever have a manager like you. I was like, what are you talking about, right? Like, I'm just doing my job. Like, I don't understand. Like, are you talking about someone else? Because genuinely, I was literally just doing my job, which is, to set you up for your success overall. But I think that's when I realized that, hey, like, because you care, because I care, the way I do something is very different. And I don't have to be the smartest in the room. I don't have to be the brightest in the room. I just have to care enough to get things done and call people in when needed overall. So I think those are the things that differentiate me. And in my experience, I've just picked this up from people that I've looked up to or people that I've resonated to. And so I always say, hey, like, I love how Jeff does this, I'm going to do that. I love how Narayan does this, I'm going to do that. I love how Ross does this, and I'm going to do that, right? I love how Asha does this, and I'm going to do that. I love how Scott does this, and I'm going to do that. So I think that is a conscious thing that I do, and I spend time to do that. And I think that is always going to differentiate a good leader or a good person, and even honestly, or a good manager, than maybe not as good or not as great one. So that's the difference that I usually see across the board.
Yeah, because I sort of believe that even from my own personal experience, I've had some really great managers as well, but then I believe that at times they had a certain way to themselves about being super cutthroat about things. They would care, but then they would not really show it. So when you become a manager, your way of doing things is different because now, you have ages or generation like Gen Z that you're leading. So obviously things are different for you in comparison to how things were done back by your superiors, and those tactics, they sort of do not work anymore because the time has changed, the generation has changed, and at times people management cannot really be that easy, while you're managing people and then doing your own work as well. And then it can get a lot at times and overwhelming, especially when you care. So,
Yeah.
how would you comment on that?
Totally. I think 100%. And I think that to me is why it's so important to make sure managers are well supported, as well as making sure they're not having to do what I call like individual contributor work in addition to their job, right? So when I initially became a manager, I was still, writing specs and shipping products as a whole. And I will say that that initial period was really hard because I was being a manager and doing this role, which in my opinion, it's impossible to do both well. And the only way I did it is I slept nothing, and I never want to do that again. But I think that it's so important to create that culture that is supportive of managers, but also pushing managers to be like, hey, like, it's okay to meet people where they are, and you amplify a different side of your leadership style with different people, right? And so being able to be who you are at work, I think, is super important. Like, for example, I don't have the time or the cycles to be a different person at work versus like not at work. Like, that to me is too much work. So I think how we can incentivize people to bring their authentic self and validate that, dude, like, it's okay to care. Like, we all care. It's fine. Whether we want to admit it or not, we all care at the end of the day. And yes, that comes with the tax. It's exhausting, actually. Exhausting to care. I will not agree. I'm like, I'm tired. Like, I'm ready to sleep this weekend as a whole. But I think it's also important that we are people. Like, if I'm spending 8 hours or more at a job in a day to day with people, I want to create a culture that is fun. I want to create a culture that is reliable, a culture that is engaging, a culture that people can bring their own authentic selves to as a whole. Of course, with boundaries, of course, with healthy environments as a whole, but that cannot come at the cost of caring. Like, I think that we have this thing, and it's going to sound like I'm drinking so much of the Microsoft Kool-Aid, but they always tell managers that, like, hey, you have to, what is it? Coach, care is like basically two of the three important kind of ideals as a whole. And I think that's so important, right? You coach people because either you could do it in the short term, but then suffer in the long term if you don't coach them. Because sometimes it's really hard to be like, I can just do it myself. But that's easier in the short term, but in the long term, that's painful. So becoming the person is like, okay, let me coach you through this. Let me help you think end to end why this is valuable in the way we do it. And so again, that takes time and energy because I could have just had it done because I know how to do it. But now my skill set is not evaluated on what I'm getting done individually. It's how I'm enabling a group of people to get things done and how I'm enabling them to empower themselves to get it done, right? And so they always have this coach care thing. And so coach and care is so important because that's really the fundamental of it. So I personally don't get when people are like, hey, like just to the point and closing it. I'm like, you can do that if that's the kind of person that you're chatting with, right? If you're interacting with, but that's not going to fly with everyone else. Some people love that. Some people love the direct, this is what it is, like business to business end of everything. And that's fine. It's important for you to recognize that as a manager. But most people, in my experience, are not like that. And so it does take time. It does take energy. And I think we just have to be real with ourselves. Like it is like a lot of times I'll do my manager stuff. And then at 5 p.m., I'll be like, oh crap, I've gotten none of my work done. Right? It is just part of the job and it is part of the part of it. And so finding companies that support people in those roles that acknowledge the coaching and the caring, I think is super critical as well.
And I sort of believe that, being at Microsoft, they've sort of built and put culture, together in a way, since they have a lot of diverse people coming from different places, different countries for that matter. And since they're advocating on all of the principles of inclusivity, but it's not really followed the same way in the rest of the companies out there. So, what particular, advices would you give on managerial levels for companies and people that they could sort of, should implement at a company cultural level?
I personally believe that culture rots an organization from the head. There's only so long you can be successful, effective with a bad culture, right? And so it's so important for companies to realize that, listen, in the short term, you'll make your profits, you'll get your jobs done, things will happen. Sure, you'll retrain people, but retention or lack of retention comes at a cost to the company as well, right? So forget about the people angle, forget about the caring angle, forget about being good citizens and being good humans angle. All of that is super important. But if I had to convince a company that didn't care about all of that, I would say, dude, it's going to affect your profits. How many times are you going to retrain people on the same content? They're going to come and go because they're not going to, like, nobody's going to stay in an environment that's toxic and not a good culture, right? Maybe they'll stay in a bad job market, but the minute the job market stays like is improved, they're out. So that comes at a cost. So translating, I think this is where we failed in this like cultural and diversity inclusion conversation. It's always been the focus versus converting it into what is meaningful for the people. So if you are a company, I will talk to you in the language that makes sense to you. I'll be like, dude, your profit is going to suck. And my estimate is that you will have to retrain these people on the same content from here to here. This is how it's going to affect your gross margin. This is how it's going to affect your profit and loss statement or P&L. This is why you should care about it. And then suddenly they're like, oh yeah, you're actually right. I don't want to keep retraining people. Yes, my turnover is high and very bad compared to other things. And maybe I should do these few things that are tried and tested with these other companies, right? So I think it's the same thing, taking something seemingly complex or seemingly something that someone doesn't understand, but translating it to a language that they understand. Everybody gets profit. And usually it's people who care about the profit more than other things. What they don't realize is that profit can also be lost, or that revenue, whatever, will also be lost at the cost of culture, right?
Yeah.
I've seen this time and again. So I think just translating it into a language that resonates with the individuals and the companies is what I would say. So if they care about profit, I talk to them in terms of profit. If they care in gross margin, I talk to them in terms of gross margin. If they care on the cultural people angle, I'll talk to them in terms of that. So it's important when we have these conversations to understand what is the end goal and what motivates people and what their motives are, and meeting them at that. And I think that changes the game overall. Then it's hard to refute. It's like, no, actually, yeah, I am a CEO and I do want to make money, and then I should look at this, right? Versus like, oh, someone just telling me about culture and like diversity as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's talk about one of the hard learned lessons that you've had in life.
Oof. Hard learned lessons. Good question. I think one of the ones is definitely what we were talking about, and I'll delve into it a little deeper. So I had this interaction once, and we had this. It was actually a company that Microsoft had acquired, and so now their team was part of like our larger ecosystem, etc. And I was interacting with this one individual, and for some reason, right, they kept mentioning and name dropping, right, like this is important because like Satya said, or like whatever, someone said it, etc. And the way I am wired and functioning, like I don't care who is asking the question. The answer is the answer, and I will like have the same care and the same level of detail to it. So it could be a CEO of a company asking, or my peer asking, or even someone who reports to me asking. Like it doesn't matter what level in the org chart any of these people are, like I will respond to it with the same level of accuracy and clarity. My answer is not going to respond because you're like name dropping the CEO or something like that. So over a period of time, this really started to rub me the wrong way. And I was like, dude, like, are you questioning my integrity or my like knowledge as a whole? Like, why do you keep saying like, oh, like this is like a Satya level thing? I'm like, okay, cool. Like everything is a Satya level thing. Like this is Microsoft. And we're the cloud. Like we work in this super high scale business. Like what is the thing? And I sat there and I just stewed a little bit, right? Like I was like annoyed. I was like, what is this person's incentive or motive or whatever? And I think that was a really hard lesson. And I was like, okay, I talk about being the person who can get stuff done versus being the person who complains. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing about it? So I was like, okay, I'm giving myself 5 minutes to vent about this because venting is important. It has changed lives. And then I'm going to get over it and reach out to this person and say, hi, XYZ. You know, we've been working for a past few many months overall. This comment keeps coming up and it just didn't sit well with me. Now, given my interaction with you, I know you mean well, and I'm sure you mean well, but I will respond with the same level of care no matter what it is. And I don't think name dropping is affecting this in a positive way. And then they responded and they said, you know what? You were right on the money. We were like a small company and no one paid attention to us unless we name called. And so that's just our culture to get stuff done. I was like, that makes so much sense. It's just learned behavior. So it was not like he was doing this to trigger me or annoy me, etc. It was just their culture of how they got things done. And I was like, okay, that makes more sense. Now that you're like, you know, part of this large organization, like we will help you. Like you don't have to like, oh, like this is a Satya level escalation, right? But just that was a hard truth that I had to deal with myself, right? Like, I want to be a person who files the bug and files the repair item and does something about it versus being the person that just stews there and complain. And in fact, I feel like our working relationship improved so much more because, you know, he could trust me then to like tell him the not so great news and tell him the good news. And that's how trust is built, right? Trust is built when you give people the tough message, even if they don't want to hear it. Of course, you deliver it properly. So that was one of the hard lessons that I had to learn that, hey, like, you know what? The only person that's going to change anything is you. Like, the world owes you nothing. Nobody owes you anything. It is on you to change your environment, to affect change, to call people in. And so after nowadays, I complain for like 5 minutes and I vent for 5 minutes, I suck it up and I go do it, right? So that was like a hard pill for me to swallow. Of course, now it's gotten a lot easier, like I was saying. I think the other hard truth is that, I don't know if this is as hard of a truth as a whole, but there is no substitute for showing up. Period. You gotta be, if you want to do anything meaningful in anything in your life, work, not work, in my humble opinion, and my mother always says this, she's like, showing up is half the battle, right? She said this to me like since the beginning. And I used to wonder what this woman is on. I'm like, what are you talking about, lady? But you know what? The woman knows what she's talking about. Showing up is half the battle. You always have to be the person who shows up if you want to do anything meaningful. It is very easy for someone to sit here and say, wow, Anavi, like in 9 years, you have done all of this stuff, like, you know, you're so young, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but nobody knows that I was awake until midnight testing the first feature, even though I'm not the developer, that I had to launch overall. Nobody knows the hours that I spent in building 42 on 40 over many years and didn't go home in time for dinner, etc. Nobody knows how I showed up, right? And now I'm just reaping the benefits of how I showed up. And I'm not saying this where like I want people to know that I did all of this. I really
Yeah.
don't care. Like people don't need to know. But I think it just is the hard truth that you gotta put in the time, you gotta show up. And there is no substitute for this. If you want to do anything meaningful, I don't think anyone who is in any position that I want to be in has ever said, oh, it's 5 p.m., I gotta go. They've said, hey, like, actually, I need to go do this personal thing and I will come back as a whole, right? And I think that's the difference of how you want to be. It's kind of like in this day and age, we expect all of the benefits without doing the work. And I think that's my own message. I'm not saying be like me and test till midnight or like some crazy thing, but find the balance that works for you. I could do that then because my life looked very different back then than it did now. And my priority was more towards work than it is, whatever season of life you're in and whatever your priorities are. But there's no substitute to showing up. And that's very hard because you have to show up consistently, regularly, and all the time. And that benefit, again, will come to you later and not initially, right? Now, if you ask me, test something till midnight tonight, I'll be like, Rabia, you're crazy. I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
But again, that season in my life, I was able to show up. And then that has helped me overall. So that's the second hard pill. So to summarize, one, have the tough conversations. Nobody's coming to save you. You got to do it yourself. And then I think the second up, there's no substitute for showing up, period.
Yeah.
AI or no AI, you got to show up. You got to do the work. I think those are my two tough things, seemingly tough things that I've learned in the last few years.
Yeah. No, thank you for pouring your heart out there because, I think that was really, really insightful what you said, being able to show up and how, you do it over the years, and sometimes it's just sort of taken for granted, even by ourselves at times. We do not tend to give ourselves a lot of credit, under imposter syndrome and a lot of other things. But, there are moments when you've got to remind yourself that where you are today, it took all those years, all those nights or moments of breakdown, and hence here you are. Yeah.
Totally. I think separately, I personally have never got this imposter syndrome thing. I don't understand it. I refuse that it exists. I
Okay.
think the more we talk about it as people, I think the more people normalize it. And I refuse to let it be normalized. We should say, like, no, it's not okay. It's not a thing. You are meant to be here. This is what it is. And so it's funny. So whenever someone says that, I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Like, you're meant to be here. Like, I don't understand. This is not normal. Not normalized. It's common. It's not normal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Anavi, if you weren't like, at this age and space and time, if you weren't doing this at Microsoft, what else would you have been doing?
Wow. Great question. It's funny. Every once in a while, I have that feeling where I've learned the reward for working hard is more work, sadly.
Oh,
And
yes.
so this is one of the hard truths. No, just kidding. And so it's funny. So when I decided to move and kind of study and have a career and things like that, my mother had said that, hey, why are you doing all this? Just open an art studio. You're so good at art and you should just do that. So every once in a while, I'm just like, mother was right. I should have just opened my art studio. I would not be in the Sev 1 bridge. I would not be in this escalation/fire at work. But no, jokes aside, I think that something that I would probably be having to do is having an impact on the world. Because the only thing that keeps me going is being able to feel fulfilled, right? So I feel like when we're able to do these kinds of common technologies or solutions that's going to benefit industries across education, across any industry, education, tech, medicine, healthcare, name the industry, right? You're creating solutions and we have customers across the board. That to me is super meaningful, right? Because that's fulfilling. I'm not just doing something to make some rich company or some CEO richer as a whole, right? What we're doing is actually meaningful and moving the needle and helping. Like one of the cases that we worked on was anesthesia clinic was using one of my features that I built in their tech space. And one time I was on this bridge and they were like, hey, like, can you help us with cross-tenant VNet peering? The names doesn't matter because this is blocking our anesthesia giving like sequencing or whatever. And I was just like, oh my God, why are you trusting my feature? First of all, no, I'm just kidding. I was just like, this is crazy, right? Like this is actually real life implications of what we're doing. Like people's jobs, livelihoods are at stake. And that to me is super meaningful and powerful. And so if I was not doing this, I think I would find another way to make that happen, whether that's through service leadership, whether that's that's through nonprofit, whether that's through community-driven initiatives, I think that kind of impact that you can have is super powerful. So I don't know what it is. I do love math, so maybe it is making people love math again or something like that, or going into rural India and helping with menstrual health, for example, because that's a big issue, and it's crazy that people's lives are still affected by a completely normal bodily function just because of lack of education. So I think those are the kind of things that I would probably be into, and maybe I still will, right? Maybe I'm not going to be in tech for the rest of my life, and maybe I'll get to do things like that. But I think to me, it just comes down to feeling fulfilled. And the way I do that is helping people in industries and having an impact at the end of the day, because that's all we're here for. Nothing else really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, such lovely insights, Anavi. So, while we wrap up our conversation, so when you look ahead, where do you see AI infrastructure heading in the, next few years?
Yeah, I think the way I envision it, or what I would like it to be, is helping and aiding and abetting human beings, so to speak, and making us more productive so that we can outsource the mundane part of our jobs and the taxing part of our job, but then focus more on community or caring or coaching or doing the things that uniquely only we can do. Like, I would love if some of the processes that we have to do are just automated and off the hook as a whole, right? Because every company, even like Microsoft, has different processes that you have to follow for a variety of different things. And so if we could have an AI agent to help with that, that's amazing, because then that's less mundane stuff a human has to do, or less repetitive work, or maybe your HR team is doing that same analysis or input across every single person, and maybe their mental health is not so great because they're like, oh my God, every third day I'm telling the same person the same thing. And so if we can help kind of some of those areas, I think that's what I envision it to be, right? So taking kind of the mundane, the not so great aspects out, so people can focus on doing the things that truly fulfill them, that they're passionate about. I really believe that each job, no matter whose job it is, there's some portion of the job that's the tax you pay, right? The not so great aspects of the job, but you got to do it. We got to pay our taxes, so we got to do it. So if that tax of a job can be gotten rid of or can be changed because of AI, that would be my dream. So that's the future that I'm going to envision today, because that's what I'd like to see, and just have it help people and augment and make our lives better versus taking over, I guess. But taking over is a myth. I don't think that's actually going to happen.
Lovely. So, just any one piece of advice in particular for women, who are in tech or in leadership roles?
Call people in, right? Don't let it go. Like you were talking about how some people let it go earlier. Don't let it go. I think the biggest fallacy that women or anyone can have, or the biggest issue that we've created for ourselves, is we do a lot, but we don't talk about it and we don't complain about it. We just suck it up and kind of do it. And I think that's the biggest disservice we've actually done to men and the world as a whole, because nobody knows of our struggles. Nobody knows of our lived experiences. So talk about them. Like, for example, if something that's uniquely related to being a woman is impacting my day to day, you best believe every man I talk to in that day, like, knows what the issue is, because that's going to help them build empathy. They cannot be empathetic for you if they do not know your struggles. And they are not going to know your struggles if you don't tell them, right? So don't just tell your girlfriends, tell your guy friends too, because they also will then develop empathy and then be the next set of leaders that help the next set of women overall. So that's one thing that I would do. Don't let it go. Call people in, share your struggles. I think that's super important for us to build empathy for everyone.
Well, Avi, thank you so much for joining us today and taking out the time. We look forward to seeing more of your incredible work, that you continue at Microsoft. And it was just lovely having you over.
Thanks so much for having me, Rabia, and to the team as well. I really appreciate it. This was such a great conversation. What a great way to start my Friday. Thanks so much.